My name is John Hagen and I'm a math and science teacher here at JCHS. On top of the several computer classes that we offer at JCHS, we also offer a robotics and engineering class. One of the reasons I enjoy working with the robotics and engineering class is our ability to participate in the first technology challenge that is offered every year. We generally split our class into two teams, the programming team and the build team. The build team focuses on the construction of the robot, where students discover how motors, servos, chains, gears, and custom parts are integrated into the design of the basic robot. The programming team learns how our Java framework is used to program all of the robot's functionality. One of my favorite milestones of the year is the day that the build team receives their first shipment of robotic supplies. I also really enjoy the day that the programming team actually sees their code cause the robot to move for the very first time. The small class sizes at JCHS ensure that everyone in the robotics class has an important part to play for the success of the team. On our current programming team, we have one team working on a robotics transport, one team working on the robot's appendages, and a third programmer working on integrating the robot's vision with an AI technology called TensorFlow. Access to the spacious JCHS EverLab gives us ample room to test the building team's robot on an actual competition board, which helped us enable to finish in the semifinals of our last in-person FTC competition. Our beautiful facility also enables us to be one of the few San Francisco schools to host first LEGO League tournaments and scrimmages for middle school teams. We have a couple of months of class after the robotics season, where several of the labs are inspired from some of the mechanical engineering labs that I experienced in college. One of my favorite labs is from the second semester, where we have the inverted water cooler lab, where students are asked to predict how long it will take a large water bottle to empty out when held upside down by running experiments on smaller bottles and running linear regressions on those experiments. As a whole, the robotics and engineering curriculum is designed to challenge the JCHS students regardless of their technical background, while also taking advantage of the strong sense of community that is fostered in all of the JCHS classes. Not surprisingly, it is when we give our students the tools to learn together that they truly thrive.
And so while we're doing some of these introductions, I'm going to ask all of you to just be thinking about the questions that you have for us about robotics, computer science, math, for our teachers and for our student ambassadors. Please feel free to put those into the chat. As Leslie mentioned, we're monitoring your questions and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. If we don't get a chance to answer your particular question, just know that we will circle back to you and make sure that you get answers to all of that. So with that, I'm wondering if we can have Mr. Hagen and Mr. White just kind of introduce themselves and talk a little bit about which classes they're teaching. So I noticed, Mr. Hagen, did you jump back on? Are you here?
I did, yes, yeah.
Okay, excellent. I couldn't find your message first. Do you want to just introduce yourself?
Yes, great. So yeah, I am Mr. Hagen. I am the computer science and robotics and engineering and math teacher and basketball coach at JCHS. So I just got back out of basketball practice, and tonight we're going to talk about two classes I teach: engineering robotics and AP computer science programming.
Excellent, thank you. And just like our students do a lot of different things, our professional community members also do a lot of different things and wear different hats. Mr. White, could you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Hi, I'm Mr. White. I teach 9th grade Foundations of Computer Science class, unlike others you've seen, more on that later, and AP Computer Science Principles, which is available to anybody from 10th grade on. I also teach 2 sections of geometry here at JCHS.
Nice, excellent, thank you so much. And I'd love to turn to our student ambassadors. So maybe if you could introduce yourselves, tell us your grade, what middle school you went to, maybe what computer science or engineering classes you're taking, and feel free to throw in anything else that you're doing, because we know that you also juggle quite a bit. So why don't we start with Mimi and then go Yoni, Zohar, and Sharon.
Okay, hi everybody. I am Mimi. I'm currently a senior at JCHS and I went to Brandeis of San Francisco for middle school. I have taken AP Computer Science A, which is the programming class, and I'm currently in robotics and engineering. And at JCHS, I am a part of the girls volleyball team, and I also am a part of the Paw Print, which is the yearbook club.
Love it. Thank you so much. Yoni, can you go?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Yoni. I came from South Peninsula Hebrew Day School, and I also, with Mimi, took AP Comp Sci A, and this year I'm also on the robotics team. I'm in the programming part of the robotics team. I'm on the programming team. At JCHS, I'm a junior, and I'm part of the soccer team, the Student Athlete Advisory Council, and I'm assistant editor of the Observer, which is the school newspaper.
Lots and lots. You're doing a lot of things. Thank you so much. Zohar, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Zohar. I'm a junior. I also went to Brandeis. I took AP Computer Science Principles with Mr. White last year, and then this year I'm taking AP Computer Science A with Mr. Hagen. And what else do I do? I am actually currently doing the school's independent PE program, where if you're not associated with a school sport, you can go out and find your own sport, and you log it, and that's how I'm getting my sports hours.
What sport are you doing outside of school?
I actually like to go to the gym at the JCC, which is super close to the school, so that's super convenient.
Nice. Excellent. Thanks, Zohar. Sharon, would you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Sharon, and I'm a sophomore at JCHS, and I went to Presidio Middle School. And currently I'm taking AP Computer Science Principles, but last year I took Foundations of Computer Science. And just like Zohar, I'm also a part of the independent PE program, and I also go to the gym outside of school.
Nice. Excellent. Thanks so much, Sharon. So Mr. Hagen, Mr. White, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit, sort of broad strokes overview. What are some of the options for students? Like if you come in and you really want to do, as much computer science as possible, could you do a 4-year track through the computer science program?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe the easiest way to talk about this, I'll do the first 2 years and hand it off. So conceivably, you could come to JCHS in 9th grade and start off with Foundations of Computer Science. So this is a class that is about really like the math and the big problems that underlie computer science. So I'll show you guys some examples of that. We start with cryptography. We do codes and ciphers from the ancient world. Here's the Babington cipher. Here was a bunch of students, you can see, including Sharon, posting stuff in the Vigenère cipher, once considered uncrackable. After cryptography, we move into logic. Here's an essay with as many logical fallacies as humanly possible about why you can't trust teachers. And I should mention Adriel's mom teaches at the school, so Adriel knows when you can't trust teachers. And this is setting us up for a later paper that I'll talk about. And actually, I'll let Sharon talk about that a little bit more. We get into binary arithmetic, addition, subtraction, multiplication. And we do all this logic and binary and number theories, heading towards projects where students are simulating circuits and learning really what makes a computer work. And after that, we progress into, I saw somebody was asking about the parts of a computer, a whole unit on that. I bring in the PC that I'm on here right now, and we take it apart, put it back together. I assign students broken laptops for this project, a beloved favorite, where you're given screwdrivers and a broken computer, and you are on a scavenger hunt to find as many of the parts as you can. Literally tear it down all the way to the metal and see what's inside a computer. Like I said, everybody always loves ripping apart computers. And then there's this facial recognition paper, which I will hand off to Sharon to talk a little bit later. And then after that, it's into a branch of math we call graph theory, which is a lot of interesting problems of coloring and maps and connections between places. If any parents in the world studied computer science, you may remember these algorithms from college. I didn't love them then because nobody showed me how fun they can be. So this is a class that's all about taking these computer science ideas and algorithms into a new context. That also includes students doing history assignments, the Jacquard Loom, the Babbage engine, freaks hacking the phones, the Apollo program. So guys, I've been talking for a long time about 9th grade, but we also have AP Computer Science Principles. This is an introductory programming class. It uses this language SNAP, which was developed at Cal. If any of you guys use Scratch, you probably see this looks kind of familiar, but Snap is Scratch on steroids. Snap is really cool. You could do anything with it. This is a 3-part lab where students eventually have an AI playing tic-tac-toe. You can see I'm actually smart enough to beat the AI, but some of our students have fixed that bug. Here is some data science. And again, people think of Scratch and Snap as not really powerful languages, but you could do some really cool stuff. This is a late lab on data analysis. And I thought this one's kind of fun. This is from a Create project where in this class, in addition to coding, there's a lot of emphasis on digital literacy, ethics, stuff like that. So in addition to the test, you also submit an independent programming project, more like AP art portfolio. So hopefully this works. This is one that if I'm doing it right, should be a visualizer for my microphone. And it's been a little flaky when I try to do it live. So let's see, is this gonna work? This was actually Zohar was fooling around with this last year. And like I said, hopefully it's going to work and show some things. It's not. That's okay. It was really, oh, there we go. It's finally showing us this. So this is a visualizer. This was student work. This project allows students to make really whatever they want as long as it has some programming structures that satisfy the College Board work. And I'm going to unshare here so I can see your faces and you can see mine. And I'll mention again, that course, we also do a lot of stuff, debates about ethics, talking about stuff like robots being used to kill, automation in the world, IP law, copyright, stuff like that, personal security, real world problems. So again, you could have taken 9th grade foundations, then headed into 10th grade principles. And then the next year you could head off to Mr. Hagen's class and take, well, I'll stop talking, Mr. Hagen, you can take it from there.
So I saw somebody talking about our strongest programming students. So there are students at our school that are really strong programmers even before they come here. And for those students, we actually offer AP computer science programming as early as the 10th grade. You might be able to skip principles in that scenario, coming right out of foundations as a freshman. But yeah, so typically we have students taking the programming class, the AP class, as sophomores or juniors. And that basically is the AP curriculum for programming. It's the programming language we use is Java. And I kind of, so we have typical scenario where it's almost exclusively programming, and we program things like we do ASCII land, and I don't know, that means something to me. But we program a craps game during the first semester. In the second semester, we program a fairly large project. We build from scratch a game called Battleship. And the program, the curriculum basically emphasizes the things that the AP exam emphasizes, things like classes, object-oriented programming, polymorphism, sorting, arrays, array lists, and things like that. So that is the fairly standard AP exam and curriculum, and we offer it as early as the 10th grade. Our strongest students would probably take it as 10th graders. Those strong students would also typically take a robotics class as either juniors or seniors. The robotics and engineering class, the first half is basically competing in the first technology challenge. And as some of the people have already mentioned, we have a build team and a programming team. The programming team basically works on Android Studio to build programs that make the robot move to compete in the game, while the build team basically uses CAD to design the robot and then eventually builds it. And that basically is a several-month project. And we have our first competition this year in December. We'll do a second competition in either January or February, and then we'll finish the rest of that engineering class. So the second half is more engineering, although if you're on the build team, there's a lot of engineering in the first semester, where we do things like an egg drop experiment, Rube Goldberg machines, and there is finally a lab that's based on my experience. I was an aerospace engineer 30 years ago. And my favorite lab from that was the inverted water cooler lab, where I take a water cooler behind me and I turn it upside down, and students take smaller bottles and turn them upside down. Oops, gosh, it's a little leak on that. And by using the smaller bottles, they predict how long it's going to take the bigger bottle to empty out. I'll give them any dimensions they ask for, and they'll use similar bottles to sort of predict that. It uses a couple of other uses, linear regression, dimensional analysis, And really, it's true engineering. There is really no way to predict that model behavior. You basically have to use old-fashioned engineering. And those are the two classes I teach, and those are for our more advanced students. Finally, if you're really, really advanced, and this happens every, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 students a year, you can actually focus your keystone in your senior year on something very programming heavy. And we've definitely had students do that. We've had students build video games. We've had students build apps on their phone, things like that. So our strongest students actually have a way to use the keystone to even enhance that more.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. There's a lot to unpack there. So we heard a lot of really interesting projects that you do in all of these classes. I'm wondering if we do kind of a little lightning round with the students and ask you about your favorite projects that you've worked on. So maybe we could go, let me see, Sharon and Zohar and Yoni and Mimi. And can you just tell us something about a project that you really enjoyed working on? And it's okay if it was like super challenging and you were tearing your hair out in the moment, but now in retrospect, you find it really, really interesting. Because I know that that's sometimes how those projects work. So Sharon, do you want to go first and just talk about something that you enjoy doing?
Yeah, sure. So this wasn't like a project that we usually would really do in class. It wasn't like actual programming, but every freshman has to do a research paper at the end of the year. And it's either on history or computer science, depending what class you're taking. And I did it on computer science, and we had to do a research paper about facial recognition and the pros or cons of it. And you get to choose, and you like convince the reader what if there's like a pro or a con of facial recognition. And we had a lot of help by Miss Gluck, and we had an outline, and we learned how to write a proper thesis, and I think it was really interesting to learn about it.
So you got a lot of skills in researching that topic. Thanks so much. Great. Zohar, how about you? What's some memorable moments for you?
Well, one thing from Mr. White's class is the create project we do at the end of the year, which we actually ended up looking at a little bit. And that is the project aspect that you submit to College Board. And I just remember working on that for a while and just being very satisfied when it was finished. It was just a very memorable thing for me because it wrapped up the year very nicely. It's sort of the end of the year. Well, at midway through the year, we work on it a little, but then towards the end of the year, we really sink into it. And that was, that's very memorable from that class. And then this year, Mr. Hagen mentioned, we've been doing this thing called, or we did a lab called ASCII Land. And I banged my head into that for so long. And then I got my friends and I banged their heads into it. And it was a very hard lab in the moment. And then I finished it and I did it. And once it's done, the feeling you get from like finishing a computer science project is unlike anything else. Like something you just try so hard at, and then like you actually do it, and then it runs and it outputs like 4 digits and then like a letter, and you're like, whoa, amazing. So that just felt awesome. So that's pretty fresh in my memory.
Nice. And it's always better when you can actually put people's heads together, right? Yeah. So, and Zohar, just a quick follow-up. You mentioned submitting to the College Board. Is that part of the process for that AP computer science class that you
yeah. So I know for sure principles, I'm not so sure about A. On top of doing the computer science test, like the AP test, you also submit a project that fulfills their requirements. It's very open-ended, and they don't give you any real prompt. It's just like, fulfill these requirements, show that you have know about the things that we learned about this year through your code, and you submit that with your test, kind of like in like an AP art class where you'll submit your art portfolio or maybe do a test. I don't know how AP art works.
Right. Yeah, but you get to really show by doing. Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much. Yoni, do you want to tell us a little bit about something you enjoyed?
Yeah, sure. I'm not going to count the robot that we're currently working on because we haven't finished that yet.
Okay.
But last year, our final project in Computer Science A was to create a working battleship kind of like the board game where you hide like 5 ships and guess your opponent's location. And we made that battleship from scratch, complete with a computer AI that you would play against, actually. That took a long time, let me tell you. A lot of hours went into that. And I completely agree with Zohar. There is nothing like the rush you get from finishing a hard computer science lab, whether it's like a project or something along those lines. More than anything else, computer science, when you finish one of those, it's incredible feeling. And so that battleship was so much fun in the end. We got to play it, and even though it was a lot of hard work, it really kind of summed up our class and our year that year. And aside from that, we also made a functioning Pong game, fully functioning Pong game, and that was also one of my favorite projects that I made.
Nice, excellent. And you sank a lot of battleships. Nice. So Mimi, how about you? What's something that's kind of memorable for you?
I think that my most memorable project that I've ever done was pretty recently. I'm on the programming team in robotics, and for part of the competition, we had to train an AI to recognize our very own object. We used this little wolf plushie that we have, and it took a lot of work. There was not very much documentation on the whole process. Yes, that's what the wolf plushie looks like. And there was very little documentation on the process. So it was a lot of figuring it out. I was working with my dad, who had a little bit of experience in this area. And we finally got it working, and we were able to test it through the robot. So now essentially when you use the webcam that's attached to it, you can point it at 3 different objects that are being used in our final game, and it will recognize what and where the objects are in order for the robot to be able to go pick them up or do something with them without us controlling it.
Amazing. And you get extra points for that, right?
Yeah.
Love it. Thanks so much for sharing these. So I'm noticing, thanks so much everyone for putting your questions into the chat. So I think that we might have hit a couple of these questions. Mr. White, you were so trusting to let students take apart your computer. So yes, we do have students actually get to be hands-on and take apart hardware and put it back together again, and clearly it functions. So coding languages, I think we heard a couple of different coding languages, but Mr. White, Mr. Hagen, can you talk about which languages we teach?
Yeah, so AP Computer Science Principles uses Snap. Foundations is not really a programming focused class. We definitely had some coding projects in it, like in the networking section of class, which I don't know if they mentioned, is the whole computer networking, how to make that work. We've definitely done some stuff with HTML, CSS in the past. And there is a logic circuit programming exercise, which isn't a programming language, but it's very far down the abstraction chain, whatever you call it, the ladder. And I guess, Mr. Hagen, do you want to talk about the coding in your classes?
Yeah, so the coding in my classes is extensively Java. The AP class is exclusively Java. For the robotics, it is also based mostly on Java. We almost veered into Python for about a week, and then decided that we had a better choice. But with robotics, anything is fair game. Actually, also when we start doing Raspberry Pis and things like that in the spring, for people that are interested, Raspberry Pis can involve a lot of Python programming. So there is opportunities for other languages in the robotics and engineering curriculum, because you kind of define it yourself.
That reminds me also in Keystone, the senior projects at the school. Like Mr. Hagen was saying earlier, we had a student do a game in Unity a couple of years back, self-taught. Last year, we had a student make a tool for helping him daven and know the appropriate time to pray and to show the correct part from the Torah and everything. And he learned, that was a huge JavaScript coding exercise. We ended up publishing it on the Android store as part of his share project. Last year, somebody learned Blender. They were in contact with a friend of mine who's a coder at DreamWorks. There was a coding club there before we went remote for a while, where they were learning about iOS app development. So students have found a ton of ways to go seek out the language that they want to know more about.
Nice. Thank you so much. And I just wanted to mention too, you might see our students snapping a little bit. I think some of you have been snapping along. That's how we've been showing our appreciation, whether we're on Zoom or whether we're in person, when you hear something that we enjoy. So we snap for each other. So there are a couple of questions that I want to throw to our robotics team. One is, could I do both building and programming? And I think Mr. Hagen, you answered Johnny's question a little bit, but I also know that we have Yoni and Mimi here. Maybe they can talk about that a little bit. And then also somebody else would like to know if teams alternate between programming versus building. Do both teams learn these different skills, or does it stay kind of a little bit separate? So Yoni and Mimi, maybe you could talk a little bit about what the crossover looks like between programming and building on your project.
Yeah, totally.
I can go. So the majority of the people on, or actually everybody on the building team, the programming team this year has already taken the computer science programming AP class, which is really helpful to already know the foundations of computer science and programming before you come in, because it is a lot to learn in a very short period of time if you don't know that. So there aren't a ton of people who are on the building team who are really prepared to easily do a lot of work in the programming team. However, if you had already taken computer science A, then it definitely is possible that you could do a little bit of both. Although even if you aren't really doing both at the same time, because we're working on the same robot, it's very intertwined. So you're not doing like exclusively programming or exclusively building, because you're creating one project in the end. So you definitely have to be working together with both teams to make the final product work.
Lots of cross collaboration there.
Yeah.
Yoni, do you want to jump in?
And for those that haven't done coding before, it's kind of difficult to bring them into the coding aspect, but that just means that they're not actually putting in the code into the computer. It doesn't mean they're not involved with us or talking with us, and there's always a ton of collaboration of letting us know what to do and what kinds of things need to be done. And like we said, it is one project, so we all are working together, and we're just all working to each other's strengths. So the people that have taken comp sci A are better programmers and therefore doing more of the programming than the people that aren't. And like Mimi said as well, the programmers are helping with the building, although right now it's kind of, because we're still getting into it, there isn't that that fully everybody's in the same room at the same time. The builders are putting together the base of the robot right now, and we're kind of getting the base of the code going for the most part. So.
If I can just add real fast, because I know Mimi actually officially is on both teams. She has only done programming, but we are going to try to honor her wish to be on the build team. It is harder to be on the build team and transition to programming. There's a pretty steep learning curve. There's a pretty steep learning curve for building too, but we might try to move Mimi onto the building team, as she has expressed interest in both.
Nice, excellent. Thank you so much. And I think there was also a question about prerequisites, which was sort of kind of covering a little bit, but let me ask Mr. Hagen, Mr. White, if a student comes into JCHS with relatively little programming experience or little experience in these arenas, will they feel like they can jump into, the foundations class? Do they need to have programming experience before they come in?
Definitely not for foundations, although as I said in the chat too, that's a class that if you have been coding, it will really deepen your appreciation for some of the things about how the computer works and how a network works. Similarly with principles, if you have been programming for years, some things about principles, I don't want to say it may be too easy. There's a lot to get out of it if you haven't been formally studying computer science and abstraction and algorithms, all the kind of things we tend to talk about in class. But that's certainly something, if you're coming in with no experience, you would do fine in principles. And I suspect you'd also be fine in CSA as long as you have the algebra background and a willingness to work hard.
Nice. Thank you so much. So I'd love to ask Sharon a little bit more about the AP Computer Science Principles class. So one of the things that I know you kind of address is tackling real world problems. We've heard about a couple of those. Can you share with us just like some of the topics that you've been talking about recently in that class?
Yeah, so we a lot of the time, instead of doing just like basic labs in class, we have discussions in the beginning of class, and sometimes we talk about like copyright and trademarks and patents, which is like how you get like how you get control over a certain idea or company or item that you created. And we also talked about remixing, which is different ways of changing up songs in movies for it not to get um, copyrighted and for you to have your own version of it without breaking any laws. And we also talked about different like protection on social media and protection on emails and credit card information. And we also there was a video that we watched or an article that we read about um, how Facebook was getting in trouble because of different things that bad organizations were posting on their app. And it was a whole debate about if Facebook should have like certain age requirements or if there should be more strict rules about who is censoring the things going on Facebook, because there were really negative things being posted online. And we talked about different topics like that because that is also has to do with computer science, even if it's not necessarily programming.
Really interesting ethical dilemmas too. Like how do you approach some of those questions? Great, thank you so much, Sharon. So I know you've taken principles. You're in A now. Can you tell us a little bit about what's the difference between those classes? We've heard a little bit about it, but can you compare them?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the most obvious difference is obviously the coding language. So in principles, we use Snap, like Mr. White was showing earlier, and then in A, we use Java, usually coded through Eclipse. So that's probably the biggest difference you'll see. But ultimately, even though their writing is different, their syntax is different. It's really the same thing. I was looking over some of my old Snap projects, and they're so similar. And I think going from principles to A gives you a really solid foundation for what coding logic usually looks like. Another kind of difference between the two is that in principles, we'll kind of stray away from coding sometimes and focus more on the ethics of coding and computer science in general. I remember last year we spent a few days talking about how advancing technology can be bad for people and what that looks like in our world today. And so that was really interesting. And we got into, I can't remember all the things we got into, but the principles also focuses on ethics of coding on top of actual coding in Snap. And yeah.
I love that it's not just about, sort of these isolated ideas and projects, but you're thinking about how they live in the real world, how you live in the real world. Excellent. Thank you so much. There's a question in the chat, and I want to maybe toss this over to Mr. White and Mr. Hagen. What is it that you hope that students get from these classes? What's the takeaway? And I know you teach different classes and maybe they have, sort of different goals. But could you give us sort of broad strokes what you hope students will gain from this?
I guess I'll start it off, Mr. Hagen. I want you guys to love math and computer science as much as I do. I didn't realize how cool this stuff is until I got to college. I feel like there's a lot of gatekeeping that goes on out in the world, keeping people out of the really interesting ideas in STEM. And it's really cool to share it with young people. JCHS is a really interesting community full of thinkers who are going to go out in the world and do stuff. And I love the idea that you guys might be thinking about this someday, whether it's algorithms or hardware or security or whatever.
Thank you. Mr. Hagen, how about you?
I would say the goal of the programming class is for students to develop a baseline competency in programming, because it can be used in a lot of different areas in college, and I think it's important have that baseline competency. That is really what the AP programming class is designed for. The robotics design is really to share the incredible education I got at college, share my favorite labs as part of the engineering curriculum. And as part of the robotics curriculum, I've been doing it for over 10 years. I introduced my kid to it when he was in the second grade. I've been teaching it to second graders for 10 years. If it was available when I was a kid, I don't even know. I probably would have never left the house. I would have just built robots all day. Like it's super. I mean, some of you might already be exposed to it. It's middle schoolers, but I think the availability of that is awesome. I think the support they have from FIRST is incredible, and I just love that we're taking advantage of all that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And students, I kind of want to throw that same question to you as well. Do you feel like you have a takeaway from the classes that you've been working on? We've heard about how you're covering a lot of different topics. So I'm wondering, maybe we could go Mimi, Yoni, Zohar, and Sharon. Like, what's your takeaway from these classes? What do you think is really like the kind of meat of it?
Well, for me at least, I think one of the main things that I've taken away from this class is especially computer science for which I took last year, is just like a really strong interest in it. I was expecting to like it, but I wasn't expecting to like it so much and to think it was so much fun. I'm really into like problem solving and puzzles and stuff like that. So for me, it felt pretty similar with trying to figure out which lines of code would be the best to create a solution to the problem or the prompt that we were given to make the code work. And that was honestly so much fun. And it also gave me, again, really strong problem solving skills to use in other classes and other experiences in my life.
Love it. Love it. How about you, Yoni?
Yeah, definitely, like, it got me thinking in a different way when I looked at problems. Like, it was funny because I was in like a pre-calc class, and a problem was posed to us, and I was just like, oh, I'll just code this into my Eclipse. And that's just like something I never would have thought of for like solving a math problem or something like that. And so, yeah, I came into it with quite a bit of interest, and I left with more interest, more questions, which is awesome. It's really like giving you a chance to explore what you're looking for. And it's awesome to now finally be like applying that kind of stuff to this robotics competition that we're about to do in December, and then hopefully later in life as well.
I love it when things build like that, right? Zohar, how about you? What's your takeaways?
Yeah, kind of building off what Yoni said, one big takeaway I've just noticed from both my computer science classes is that coding can be applied to really like anything. Like it is, and it's very like commonplace in a lot of just life today. I find myself kind of like walking around and I'm maybe looking at someone like an app on someone's phone or something like that. I'm like, how would I code that? And so yeah, one big takeaway is just like, it is so commonplace, and it's not terribly hard to learn how to do it. The stuff we do in classes can be very difficult. You can get some real, curveballs, but to learn the syntax, it's not terribly hard. And I think, like Mr. White said, there's a lot of gatekeeping around it, but it's to just like sink into it is just awesome, and it's super valuable, and I'm just really enjoying it.
I love the way that kind of opens your perspectives. Sharon, how about you? I saw you had your hand up before too.
I think that it made me realize that computer science isn't just programming, and I already knew that before, but we practice so many different things with logic and learn about so many different real life situations that have to do with things I didn't even realize were computer science in the first place, which made me more interested, more engaged in the class, because I realized like this isn't just something that I'm probably not going to need in life unless I have a job that's to do with it, but it actually is applied in a lot of different things in life.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So I have one final question actually for the students. And this is kind of more general, not just about computer science and programming. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about why you picked JCHS. What was it about JCHS that excited you? So why don't we go in reverse order? Why don't we start with Sharon, and then Zohar, then Yoni, then Mimi?
I picked JCHS. Well, my sisters actually went here for a couple years a long time ago, so I already knew about JCHS. But I also really liked it because even though it was a lot different than my middle school, because I went to a really big public middle school, um, I realized that a smaller school actually was something that I needed in like a more tight, closer community and people that I could actually relate to and knew more about than 1,200 other kids in my school that I probably half of them never even got a full conversation with throughout like all 3 years of middle school. And I think it was just like even when I just shadowed JCHS, I felt like I already was going there for so long because it just felt like everyone knew each other and everyone was so nice to each other and everyone had something that they could relate to about and everyone was so welcoming that I wasn't even like worried that there was anything about JCHS that I could be like, oh, like the school is just like not for me. So I feel like anyone that wants like a closer community, JCHS is definitely for that.
Nice. Yeah, it is. It's a great thing. It's not to be underestimated, feeling like you're known and you're seen, right? Zohar, how about you? What made you pick JCHS?
Um, I guess like I don't know if it was like any one thing, but one thing that was very compelling to me was my shadow like experience, my experience shadowing. I like I showed up and like immediately I felt very welcomed. Like everyone was like, oh, are you shadowing? And I'm like, oh yeah. Like, and they're like, oh, who's your shadow? And then everyone was talking about my shadow. And then I'm like people that they had zero obligation to talk to me. They were just walking to class and I felt very welcomed right away, which was awesome. Um, and then just walking around all day, it was cool to like actually spend time in the classes and see what it's like to go to the school. And so I'd say my shadowing experience was very positive, and I think that's what really sold it to me, just like that feeling of being welcomed. And I'm really glad the small school setting works great for me, and I love like just all the one-on-one time I get with my teachers. If anything like goes awry, I can really just like show up at their office. I mean, sometimes I wouldn't like recommend that. Usually I schedule a meeting, but if it's desperate, I just can just show up at their office and I know I won't be like yelled at. I can just get their help.
We would never yell at you, Zohar. Yoni, how about you?
So I came from a small school environment and like a very like Jewish centric school, middle school and elementary school. And I was really looking to kind of continue that. And I don't know, when I went to like information sessions and just looked at JCHS, it was just so appealing to me, just like the Jewish aspect coupled with the small school aspect, coupled with like a really high level of academics that I'd been told by seniors or current seniors that were just a year ahead of me and had like been telling me all about JCHS. It just felt really appealing, and I definitely do not regret my decision. I'll tell you that much.
Excellent. Really embracing all aspects. And Mimi, how about you as a senior?
Yeah, so I definitely would say that I chose JCHS because of the community, but not just the community between students, but also the community between students and teachers. When I was looking at JCHS, I really saw the emphasis on student-teacher relationships and how every teacher really wants you to succeed and learn the material and not just get a good grade. And that was really appealing to me. And I feel like that has helped me become such a stronger student and feel really passionate about the courses that I'm taking, which has really allowed me to be invested in the learning and really interested in the classes that I'm taking. And that really appealed to me.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And not to leave anyone out, but I'm actually curious, and I'm throwing you a little curveball. Mr. White and Mr. Hagen, could you talk about what you love about teaching at JCHS? Maybe we could go Mr. Hagen and then Mr. White.
Yeah, well, I mean, some of the students have just spoken about that, but I taught at a similar school before JCHS. But the thing that is different about this school really is the sense of community you have here. It's almost family, and I've heard somebody say like, Yeah, I mean, families fight, and I guess families do fight, but families pick each other up like nobody else can. So it's amazing. Like, I mean, you really have to experience it to really understand it. But once you're here, you really like being part of a big family is a big deal.
I totally agree. Couldn't agree more. Thank you. Mr. White, how about you?
Yeah, I reflected on this a couple of years ago. We were talking about these themes of community in a meeting, and it occurred to me that community is like a whole web of trust, all these different people trusting each other. And you go through your day and you know everybody around you loves this community, cares about this mission, wants to make the most of what they're doing. Students, faculty, everybody, there's so much trust and love. There's so much more than I went to a school that was quite a bit like JCHS, and the students here are just blow me out of the water. It's amazing to be here. It's a great place to work. I feel a lot more Jewish working here. I was raised kind of like hippy dippy, renewal movement Jewish, but like for me, being in this pluralist Jewish community has helped me realize like that I am a good Jew, and that feels good to know. It's a great place to work and go to school and just be part of it.
Love it. Totally agree. Well, I want to thank all of you for sharing so much about computer science and also about your experience at JCHS. So thanks to all of our students and also Mr. White and Mr. Hagen. With that, I'm going to toss it back to Leslie.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary Ellen. And I'm echoing your gratitude to Mr. Hagen and Mr. White and our amazing student ambassadors, Yoni, Mimi, Zohar, and Sharon. Thank you. Thank you for taking time tonight to share about your JCHS experiences. And thank you, Michelle. It's so awesome working with you. And I want to thank our 8th grade families. Thanks for joining us tonight. Be sure to check your inboxes each Friday for that email from us. And we hope to see you very soon. We look forward to seeing you at an upcoming visit or a tour. And you're, of course, welcome to join us at any of these Wolf Wednesdays in the future. So next up, we are going to close this Wolf Wednesday like we do every week with a sprinkling of positivity in the chat. So we're going to ask you to share one thing that you are grateful for after having spent some time learning more about robotics and computer science at JCHS. So type your word in the chat and please stick around to read some others. Thank you and be well.